Okay, well, if you ever thought that life was like a movie, then you really need to meet Kristina Paider. So, Kristina is the author of The Hollywood Approach, which you might be backwards the way that you see it, but it is her new book and her approach to being able to help you live your wildest dreams and script your life like a hit movie. So, Kristina, welcome to Red Cape Revolution.
Thank you so much, Darcy. It's great to be here.
So, Christina and I had a chance to meet through our mutual publisher and actually share an editor. So when you all get to read my book too, you'll probably see that we can have some fun together. And Christina has some really interesting ideas. But Christina, tell us a little bit about your background because you have had a lot of corporate jobs, but also have worked in Hollywood, hence the Hollywood approach. Tell us about that.
Sure. I began my career as a journalist, actually, and quickly discovered that I was not the greatest at telling a story in 30 seconds or a minute in TV news. And so I transitioned to advertising and then marketing, and that was my corporate career. But I found my real passion and I think my real love at 27 at the behest. I don't even know where that word came from. Like I never use that word at the behest of, of, of my recruiter. And she sent me to take screenwriting class. She's like, you've got to write movies. And so that's how that started 23 years ago. And it became like a platform and a foundation that informed all of the rest of the things I did. So it influenced marketing, it influenced how I lived my life. My professor always said, Christina, to write, you have to live. So all of a sudden, my decisions and actions, I became so much more conscious of what I was doing in my late 20s. And I went on to bigger and better corporate marketing jobs, and then eventually left that world in Chicago and moved to LA to focus more on screenwriting, to do more consulting. And I became a story analyst in Hollywood, which was great fun. And over the years have analyzed tens of thousands of scenes to to just see whether the scene was legitimately getting a character from point A to point B. So that naturally bled into my life and continued to inform my life and life decisions. Is this decision moving the character forward and toward their goal, or is it something that's going to inhibit them? And of course, in Hollywood, we keep the drama in the screenplay, hopefully, and in real life, we just try to do all the things in the plus column.
So, so you, as you're learning this craft and working on all the stories, I mean, when did it hit you that that was also how real life kind of works? I mean, maybe without it all being done in 90 minutes or 2 hours, um, but where did that, where did it just strike you to say this could actually apply to my real life and could apply to other people's real lives too?
I think right away, because I think I was engineering backwards and forwards. In the beginning, I was writing an autobiographical movie script, which many people do. And it sort of became a therapy session for life. And it was sort of long and drawn out and didn't really have a goal. The character didn't have a. So I learned a lot about both life and writing for marketing and for film, that the character really has to be set on their goal, or that is not a feature film. Like there is no story if the character is unclear on her goal. And that really kicked into high gear my second year, like a year into screenwriting, when I had a devastating breakup. A devastating breakup. And it was one of those, and I never had one of these before, but it was the one that where you wake up and you're crying every morning and you can't control it. It's coming out of you like a sneeze or something. It's just like a physiological eruption every morning for an hour. I mean, that was almost movie worthy in and of itself, like in a telenovela sort of way. But after about a month of that, I was like, I am miserable. And I'm going to my screenwriting class, and my professor is still saying to write, you have to live. And so there's this confluence of all these things. And also I had a bunch of miles, and I'm like, I got to get out of here. Like, I'm like, I need a change of venue. And so I decided to go to on a trip to Europe, and where it ended in Capri, Italy, and I met a person of interest, shall we say, and I came back, and then I had to come back home like a day the next day or something, and I thought I came back home, and I was like, I do not want to be here. I am no longer waking up crying my eyes out every morning, but I still do not want to be here. And so 4 days later, and I had friends that were making fun of me, and they're like, well, the next time you do something like that, you better invite us. And so I showed up at lunch the next day, and I'm like, put your money where your mouth is. I'm getting back on the plane on Thursday. Who's in? And so returned returned to the scene of the crime in Capri, and just, was cliff diving then, and doing all this crazy stuff. But the point of all of that was just, what a great choice. What an epic choice. And everyone, I worked in the hotel industry then, and everybody's like, what are you doing? What happened? Like, who is this person? And tell us all about, and they were just so enamored. And it was such a better story to be living than this heartbreak.
Yeah.
And I think that, that was just it. It was just a better story. And that is not in the book. That is like that was just like the first thing. And I was like, wow, what a great choice that was. And that was around the time that How Stella Got Her Groove Back came out. And I can't remember. I'd have to look up and see if Stella went first to Jamaica or I went first to Capri. I don't remember. And I don't remember when I saw it in relation to this story. But the point is making conscious choices, taking conscious action toward, what are we doing with our lives?
Right. One of the things that I write and talk a lot about and is that, you only control three things: everything you think, everything you say, and everything you do, or at least you can make a choice about those things, and I love what you're saying around, if the story that you're living isn't working for you, how do you make a different choice? How do you just have a different intention? And it doesn't necessarily have to be jumping on a plane to Capri, or jumping off a cliff or something, but making a little, making a choice to move you in the right direction. And you also said something too I thought was interesting. It's like the character has to have an objective. So I know sometimes that you work with people who are like, I don't know what I want. And that comes up, in my work too. Sometimes it's like, I could do anything I want, but if I only knew what it was, but I don't know what it is, so I won't do anything. So tell me, where do you start in that kind of situation? Where does the Hollywood approach start to be able to take somebody to get into action, to be able to start making some choices?
Well, I have this saying that I use all the time, which is in writing and in this work, in this personal development work, which is, we go with what we know. Very simple. We go with what we know. So, okay, what do we know? We know something. And so sometimes that's a great dialogue and sort of challenging question. It's like, okay, I don't know what I want. Well, you must know something about what you want. Like, what do you can start with likes, dislikes. You can start with what you don't want. You can start with where you're at. Okay, hey, I'm just looking back in those years, in my 20s in my career. Okay, I'm a manager, but I want to see is how high I can go. And it's okay, but it's not great. Okay, well, what makes it just okay? And what would make it great? Okay, and so just kind of peeling away one step at a time. I think a lot of times we want to think that there's a magic bullet, or there's like one big thing. And what I've learned through this work, and certainly screenwriting informs that, is that there can be hundreds of little nuances to things. And so one of the secrets is paying attention to those nuances instead of looking for the big car explosion or the big, leaping off of a tall building, this big thing. It's like, yes, there might be that big thing at some point, but if that's not where you're starting, if we're starting and we're not sure what's happening, the place to start is with the smaller nuances and pulling them out. And then, of course, we put that into a SMART goal format. That's the start.
Mm-hmm. And so starting with what you know, one of the things you talk about, and I think we're sort of sisters of the soul on this, is around strengths and superpowers. But you also, in addition to those things, those positive aspects of who we are and getting to know those, you also add something to your character, to the person going through the Hollywood approach, that I think is so fun. I want you to tell more about it. It's called flossomness. So
Yes.
tell me about flossomness.
Yes, so flossomeness is the highly scientific equation of our flaws plus our awesomeness. And one of the things I talk about in story, whether it's business marketing or our own personal story, is we are dimensional. We are three-dimensional. And so it's very old school to try to tell a business story or a personal story the old school way where everything is I had this breakup, but then I just bought a ticket to Capri and I went there and then I stayed there and then I was happy again. That is very
Magic
two-dimensional.
wand, right?
Right, magic wand. And so when we dig a little deeper, it's important to understand our flaws and all the character flaws. And so I use a lot of movie examples in the book. I use Aaron Brockovich, I use Jason Bourne, I use Akilah Anderson from Akilah and the Bee to sort of help open the doorway and help us be comfortable acknowledging our own flaws. So if you look at mine in that scenario, I'm trying to think back now. Like one of them might have been that I was maybe procrastinating or waiting for an answer to show up, just waiting for the misery, the complete misery to stop. And I maybe waited long. I don't know. Like, I don't like to should people. I like to really encourage people to observe and not judge flaws, because flaws can also change from scenario, from story to story and situation to situation, but just observe, because that's information. And from information comes our innovation to make different choices. So, right, so maybe we could say, okay, I wallowed a bit long, or I didn't think quickly enough. What is my goal? Or I wasn't asking the right question. Maybe I could have asked a better question sooner, which would be, how can I heal from this this devastation faster, for example? Just kind of throwing out examples that people can probably relate to. I mean, they're all relative, right? Anyway, so that is flossomeness, and it's important to understand our own flaws, so that when we are in a major story and we're trying to make a major transformation, we have more information both from our past and from our current situation as it relates to our goal, to say, okay, if I have a tendency to be indecisive or to need somebody outside the jar to read the label and help me ask a better question, I can get that person on the scene in the story faster in the next story. So that's where flaws come to help us prepare for, I like to say fast forwarding success, but it's not always about moving fast or, being faster or punchier, but it is when we're talking about relieving suffering or moving forward and, just suffering less than what we could. What if I could have made that decision a week earlier? Would that have helped me? Maybe, maybe not. Again, observing, not judging.
Well, right. I love that, observing, not judging. And also I think the embracing the idea of flossomeness, as opposed to thinking, well, that's where I always screw up, or that's the mistake that I make. I think of that as mining your mistakes, but the judge in us becomes so strong, that saying, hey, this is what I know about myself, that that flossomeness. But it was interesting what you said about then anticipating it and preparing and saying, what other characters then do I need to be in the
show.
show, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things you talk about in the book, and I love this. I mean, you've shared a lot of your own journey, as well as sharing examples from your clients and examples of movies that we've all seen, or if we haven't, it's time to go back and see them again. But you talk about some of your own hurdles. I mean, again, you look good on paper, you have this nice glamorous career, but it hasn't been always easy for you. And I wonder if you can tell us a little bit about, other than just the heartbreak and going to Capri. Um, you know, you had some other hurdles you talk about in the book that also have helped inform where you are now and where you're going.
Sure, sure. One of the big story that I follow through the book is my experience um, eh, getting out of the blue panic attacks in the water. And they started after I led a rescue of two boys in a riptide in Mexico. And they got, over a 10-year period, they got increasingly worse to the point that in the beginning, in the very beginning, I noticed it slightly after the rescue happened after that first trip to Capri. Then I went back and I lived in Rome for a while, took some of my friends to that same place in Capri, and we were cliff diving. And that's when I noticed it the first time. And so I was like at the beginning, I was jumping off of cliffs and doing my crazy stuff that I always did. I'm a lifelong water lover since I was a baby, and I was a water skier and a certified diver and all the, all these different things. And so it's important to understand that context. So to go from the crazy stunts that I would just have a blast doing and be second nature to me to over a 10-year period, I couldn't put my foot in a pool without feeling like I was going to be suffocated to my own death. Was very dramatic. And so when I had this fateful panic attack one day, and it was there was no clear path forward. And so that is really the crux of why I wrote this book, for other people when they hit that moment of, I have no idea what to freaking do next. Like, there is no clear answer. There's no Googling, like, hey, what kind of elderberry herb should I take to calm this show down or whatever, right? And I would have taken it. I just so everybody knows, I am not making fun of the herbs. But so I just went through, and at the time I was a story analyst. I was reading scripts every week in my office in Hollywood on Avenue of the Stars. So the crossover was very apparent to me at that time. I was like, I have to do something, and I didn't know what to do, and I was seeking and opening myself up. I did the whole thing where I'm like, okay, all gods from all religions and guides and anybody who's listening, anyone who can hear me, like, I'm looking for what to do. And I know it sounds ridiculous, and maybe it is, and sometimes those are the best ways forward, right? So I read about this place in the Dominican Republic. It's called 27 Waterfalls, and it's where you hike up for 2 hours. And the only way back down besides helicopter rescue is to jump into those waterfalls. And by the way, there wasn't a phone that gets reception up there, so you kind of only have one way back down. So but I read it and I felt in my gut that was the thing for me. And maybe maybe there's some kind of analogy there with my one-way international tickets to exotic islands. That could totally be something. I'm not sure, but I came and did that. I came and did that like within, I think, a couple of months, or within a month maybe. And that is what I did. But along the way, I was doing a lot of other work. I was really clear, because that's a very dramatic thing to do, even for even for a Hollywood person. It's a very dramatic thing to do, but I sort of checked in with myself several times. I'm like, is this the thing? I felt that it was a form of exposure therapy that compared to the other things I was doing, which felt like Chinese water torture, and what I was trying to do for myself to get comfortable again, would work. I was very clear that it wasn't only for me, but the day that I led the rescue of the two kids, no one else was willing to go in the water. And I thought, I don't know how I could survive another incident like that if I didn't do everything humanly possible to get better, to treat myself, or to get better, or whatever you want to call it. I don't think I could be a witness and not an active participant. It's just not how I was raised with water safety. So it was very, very clear. And also, swimming was one of my favorite, and I think that was the urgency for me. was my favorite thing to do with my niece and nephew. And they were going through a bit of a rough patch with their parents' divorce. And so we had a trip coming up and planned to be with them, but it really scared the idea of me not being able to swim with them or not being able to keep them safe in the water really freaked me out, was really incongruent with my identity. So those things led to this dramatic and drastic decision. And I think they're also what fueled me when I got to the seventh waterfall. And really every part, every cell in my body was screaming like, this is not right. Like you cannot make this big
7
jump.
out of 27.
You're in
So
danger.
yeah.
You're in danger. Yeah, it was the big one. It was like the big kahuna, the big 30-foot jump. But so those are the sort of things that went into it. And as you know, and I know your work informs this too, there's so much of our actions and decisions are predicated on our subconscious mind. And what I learned later, I mean, I didn't really know all of the neuro research that was really just coming out as this was developing for me, but how important story is, and how like our subconscious mind is 1,000 times faster than our conscious mind. So it works way, way faster. And our subconscious mind makes like 95% of our decisions. So not to get into all these statistics and numbers and stuff, but those are pretty major, major numbers. Like it's telling us that our subconscious is running the show. And that's the level that story works on. So for example, if we see how Stella got her groove back, going back to a little bit lighter thing, you know, a lighter topic. Okay, she's having fun. She's buying her ticket to an exotic island. Things are working out. Okay, like somehow like that influences our subconscious mind and our beliefs. And depending on how much we, you know, focus on that and influence, we allow that to influence us and so forth. So I was concentrating a lot on my niece and nephew. I by accident couldn't get the Riptide rescue out of my mind. I mean, I wasn't really meditating on that or anything like that, but it was just something that never left me. It was a what if that never ever left me, and never left my soul. And so I think what happened on this journey when I went to do the jumps is that I had the benefit of having, for lack of a better term, or a term we haven't made up yet, but nurturing my subconscious with these success stories and with who I saw myself to be, with who I believed myself to be, being really connected to my why for not only my own family, but for future strangers that, you know, that might need help, and for my future own self. So that's a bit, I'm not sure if I even answered it. Like
no, no, absolutely. Because, you know,
I'm in my head about it. Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that I think I've learned, or maybe it was reinforced, like, especially in this past, you know, we'll call it a year. It's been more than a year. We're recording this sort of at the middle of 2021. And, you know, we're not out of the COVID woods and all of the different things that are echoing from that. And recognizing that, you know, even when you meet somebody or you talk to somebody and it seems like, well, they've got it all together, you know, everybody has their 10-year panic attack story, or there's something that happened to them. And just knowing that, I mean, I think one of the interesting things too about the approach of taking it from a story and from a, you know, what's my character, as opposed to what do I need to do? Like, what's my character need to do next? You know, just take some of, I mean, it makes a serious subject but accessible, and I think it's even fun. And so I really love, you know, what you've done with the book, a Hollywood approach. And I know that you've taught this to people, so, you know, I'm curious, and Kristina, as we wrap up, what's one message that, as you've worked through this yourself and taught other people, what's the one thing that you want people to know, you know, that you've learned about, you know, what's possible in getting closer to their character and making active choices?
I think it's really with that framing of getting closer to your character and making choices. It's the concept of observing and practicing observing not judging.
Observing,
And you can notice yourself doing it. If you don't notice it with yourself, you may notice it, you may notice yourself judging other people first, or you may notice judging yourself first. It doesn't matter, but either way, the practice of observation of, that car in front of me seems to be braking often. Like, um, not something
as opposed to some other more active term.
yes, more active profanity, or something else. But that is a good place. That's a good place as any to practice in traffic. But there seems to be some distress, and practicing this calming voice can also really be reassuring to yourself. It can be validating. We forget the art of validation and reassurance to our own selves sometimes, and sometimes we just need that. And I chose music when I was, continuing on my path, and and it's a practice, and you'll notice, you can notice different levels of your own ability as you go on in time. And I think that that's something really beautiful when you can, because the more you observe others, the more you observe yourself, and vice versa. The more you observe yourself, you will be observing others. And observing is an expanding modality, whereas judging is a contracting. It's a finite. Oh, that jerk in front of me is breaking all the time, and he's probably texting and whatever, and it's a he. Oh God, like all these things, right? But observing is expanding. It's coming at something with more love, and that is a higher vibration. And it opens up your opportunities, and it opens up your choices and actions for what's next. And that, I think, is what is important when we're trying to figure out our path, is giving ourselves more choices.
Yeah. And who doesn't need more love and more fun and more movies and more
Yes,
positivity? Please. Yes, please. More, please. Hello, universe. More, please. So, Kristina Paider, The Hollywood Approach is the new book. Thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate getting to know you and hearing more about you, and really encourage people, go grab the book. A purchase of a book is like a vote for the author's work and all that she's gone through. So thanks for being here with us at Red Cape Revolution.
Thanks so much for having me, Darcy. What a pleasure.
Thanks.